Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a stubborn Texas rancher refuses to sell his ancestral land, a ruthless HOA queen wages war to take it by any means necessary. But she didn't count on one man, one dog, and generations of grit standing in her way. Some land isn't just dirt, it's destiny. There's something about standing barefoot on dry earth at dawn, coffee in hand, dog by your side, and 12,000 pounds of sky pressing down on you like God himself checking in to make sure you're still worthy of your name. I'm Rick Barkley, 52 years old, third-generation Texan farmer, and the only damned fool in Collin County who still refuses to sell. 5,000 acres, wheat, cotton, cattle, bees, a creek that sometimes swells to a river after a good rain, and a view of the lake from the southern hill that would make a preacher forget his sermon. This land has been in my family since 1874, back when they were still shooting outlaws from horseback and the word HOA would have sounded like a dying goat. Nowadays, I'm surrounded. One by one, the old ranchers and families cashed out. Some left rich, most left tired. They sold their souls and soil to developers promising lifestyle communities with artificial lakes and man-made charm. That's how Vista Verde Ranch Estate sprouted up like a goddamn fungus on 3 sides of my property. Streetlights replaced stars. Paved roads cut through what used to be trails. And from the ashes of those transactions rose their queen, Karen Merrill, president of their glorious Homeowners Association. Karen's the kind of woman who smiles at you like she's imagining your funeral. Blonde bob that never moves, lipstick like dried blood, and a clipboard surgically attached to her left hand. She moved here about 5 years ago, bought a ranchette with less acreage than my dog's territory, and decided she was the future of Texas. The HOA, under her rule, wasn't just enforcing rules about lawn height and mailbox colors. No, they had a vision. They were building a community. And according to that vision, my land, specifically 1,000 acres down by the hill overlooking the lake, was essential for cohesive expansion. Their words, not mine. They tried nice at first. That was almost cute. First year, I got a handwritten letter, cursive, perfume-scented, inviting me to lunch with Karen and the Vista Verde Development Council. They wanted to discuss the potential integration of heritage land into the future of Collin County. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my brisket and used the letter to start the smoker. Second year, they tried again. A bottle of wine on my porch, a monogrammed pen, a Christmas card from the Merrill family, a formal invitation to join the HOA Advisory Committee. That one came with a folder titled Paths to Collaboration. I gave it to my dog to shred. He did excellent work. By the third year, they sent one of their junior devs, some 20-something in a polo shirt and boat shoes, to sweet-talk me with talk of legacy and cash-out potential. He called my land untapped capital. I told him to untap his ass off my porch. Through it all, I stayed polite, direct, firm. My land wasn't for sale, period. That 1,000 acres near the lake, I barely used it. Never had time, but it was mine. My granddad rode fence lines on horseback through there. My dad hunted deer in those trees. I spent my teenage years pretending to be a cowboy on that hill. Whether I plowed it or let it grow wild, that land didn't owe anybody anything. And that fact, the fact that I wouldn't bend, made me public enemy #1 in Karen's HOA kingdom. They surrounded me now, like wolves in yoga pants and SUVs. Every month, another neighbor sold out. One by one, the fields vanished, replaced by pastel homes with live, laugh, love, signs, and artificial turf. At the local farmers' co-op, I was a minor legend. They called me last man standing. Sometimes they said it with admiration. Sometimes like I was a dinosaur waiting for extinction, but I didn't mind. I had 12 good workers who stuck with me through drought and debt. My dogs kept watch at night. My rifles were oiled. My cameras were online. My lawyer, Dale Morris, ex-prosecutor turned real estate killer, was on retainer, and my boots were planted firm in ground my family bled for. One morning, I caught sight of Karen's Lexus parked just outside my eastern gate. She wasn't trespassing. Not yet. Just sitting there with her AC running and her shades on, watching, probably imagining where the entrance to her next gated subphase would go. I walked up to the fence, coffee steaming in my hand. She didn't roll her window down. I smiled and lifted the cup. "Not today, Karen," I said loud enough for her to hear. "Not any day." She didn't respond, just shifted into drive and rolled away without looking at me. And that's when I knew the friendly phase was over. She'd tried charm, she'd tried bribery, now she'd moved to pressure, HOA style. But I was ready. I'd fought worse things than homeowners associations. I'd walked through desert gunfire for less important things than this land. If she wanted a fight, well, she should have picked an easier target. The first sign they'd changed tactics came in the mail, buried between a tractor parts catalog and a flyer for discount cremations. It was a thin envelope with a green government seal and a return address from the Texas Environmental Compliance Board. I hadn't heard of it, which already smelled funny. I opened it while standing in the mudroom, boots still dirty, sun still halfway up the sky. Inside, a 3-page notice informing me that a section of my property, specifically the southern 1,000 acres, had been identified for ecological assessment due to underutilization and unmanaged vegetation. The wording danced around like a politician at a church picnic. In short, they wanted access to inspect for invasive species and potential environmental hazards due to land neglect. Neglect my ass. That land wasn't unused, it was resting. I'd cleared parts of it 5 years ago, planted cover crops, fenced the boundary. It wasn't some abandoned wasteland, but to these people, anything not paved or painted was apparently a threat to civilization. I called Dale, my lawyer. He listened, snorted, and said, "That's not a real board, Rick. That's a registered shell with a P.O. box in Frisco. Guess who probably funds it?" He didn't have to say her name. I told him to draft a cease and desist and add it to the growing Karen folder in the office cabinet. That file was getting thick enough to qualify as its own novella, but the environmental hustle was only the opening act. Next came the Transportation Initiative. A group of residents from Vista Verde, some of whom I'd never seen outside their own HOA walls, began lobbying the county to establish a new public access road running near the lakefront. Not through HOA land, through mine. The plan showed up on a poorly drawn county map at a zoning meeting in McKinney. They called it the Southern Scenic Route Pilot. No pilot, no scenic. Just an engineered excuse to pierce the boundary of my ranch and call it progress. I attended the meeting, of course, showed up in full gear, boots, hat, documents. They gave me 2 minutes to speak. I used 1. "This is a private ranch, not your shortcut to Whole Foods. Denied." The room was half gasps and half eye rolls. A few days later, the complaint started. Some HOA resident filed a report with animal control about aggressive dogs running loose near the greenbelt. I have trained guard dogs, not wandering mongrels. Drones were spotted hovering near the southern fence line. Too low, too curious. I shot one down and mailed it back to Vista Verde's P.O. box in a box labeled "Nice Try." Trash pickup started skipping my bins. The waste company claimed a route revision. Bullshit. They'd been rerouted away from my street by a community recommendation. I ended up hauling my own garbage to the station for 3 weeks until I threatened to sue for contract breach. Then came the letters. Printed, signed, notarized from HOA concerned committees. Not sent to me directly, but mailed to the Collin County Infrastructure Planning Office, claiming my land was under-maintained, causing erosion into neighborhood storm drains, and a potential fire risk. It was absurd. I had controlled burns scheduled, a fire break system laid out, and my soil healthier than half their manicured front yards. Karen never signed any of the letters. She wasn't dumb, but the names on the bottom, they all traced back to her circle. People I'd seen smiling over glasses of white wine at HOA meetings, now trying to sink their teeth into my fence lines. I doubled my cameras, extended surveillance to the lake edge, switched to license plate tracking for any vehicle stopping within 100 feet of my outer gates. My dog trainer came out and refreshed commands with Doug and Roxy, my 2 main protectors. 68 and 83 pounds of lean, obedient fury. By the 3rd month of this new wave, I started keeping a daily log. Every drone, every vehicle, every letter, every inspection notice. I had a whiteboard in my office that looked like a homicide detective's wall. Lines, pins, photos, maps. They were probing me, testing, trying to find the weak spot. And it was becoming clear this wasn't just Karen anymore. She had money behind her now. Developers. Maybe even quiet allies in the county zoning board. This had gone from petty HOA drama to organized pressure, strategic acquisition, phase 1, psychological warfare. Too bad they picked the wrong cowboy. One afternoon, as I stood outside the barn inspecting a broken latch, I saw a Tesla with HOA tags slow roll past the south gate. Driver didn't look my way, just snapped a photo of something on their phone and kept moving. I waved anyway. Nice and big. I wanted them to know I saw everything, because the next time they came close to that 1,000-acre hill, they'd cross more than just a fence. I was in Austin when it happened. 2 days. Tops. A quick trip to meet with the state ag board about a pilot soil restoration program and check on a veteran friend who runs a cattle operation near Bastrop. I left the ranch in good hands. My foreman, Luis, had been with me for over 10 years, and my crew knew the routine better than most city managers know their own kids' birthdays. Before I left, I made one thing clear to everyone. No one, and I mean no one, steps foot on that southern tract. Not a drone, not a hiker, not a goddamn HOA gardener with a clipboard and dreams of cul-de-sacs. The fence line was secure, the trail cams were active, and my dogs knew the scent of every man who belonged. Anything else they'd treat as a threat. I was halfway through a dry brisket sandwich at a diner off I-35 when Luis called. "Boss," he said, no small talk. "We got a situation." He didn't waste time. That's why I trust him. Apparently, a silver Ford F-250 with temporary plates pulled up to the southern gate mid-morning. 4 people stepped out. Karen Merrill, 2 men in HOA-branded windbreakers, and a guy in a cheap suit carrying a leather satchel. Probably a lawyer or someone pretending to be one. And, just for flavor, a GoPro-style camera mounted to his chest, like he was filming a documentary called How to Commit Felonies in Broad Daylight. They opened the gate. It was locked, so they used bolt cutters. On camera. They walked the property line for about 15 minutes, pointing, measuring, waving at the view. One of the windbreaker twins started dropping little white flags in the ground, survey markers likely. Then they went deeper, right past the line where the grass thickens and the hill starts to rise, the part we never opened to the public. Karen made some exaggerated hand gestures, probably explaining where she'd put her imaginary walking trails or marble clubhouse. The GoPro guys zoomed in on her face like this was her Oscar moment. What they didn't count on was Doug. Now, Doug is not your average backyard mutt. He's a full-blooded cane corso, slate gray, muscles like coiled rope, trained in both deterrence and defense. He's never bitten a soul without reason, but you don't wander onto my land and expect him to roll over and hand you a welcome packet. He was patrolling that sector on rotation, came over the ridge, saw strangers, heard no familiar command, and like any loyal son of Texas would do, he let the intruders know they were trespassing. The panic must have been biblical. Luis said you could hear the screaming all the way from the barn. One of the windbreaker guys tripped and dropped his tablet, which Doug promptly sat on like it was a chew toy. The GoPro kept filming as another one tried to climb the barbed wire fence backwards and ended up tangled like a damn fish in a net. The lawyer dropped his satchel, which popped open and revealed what looked like pre-written HOA press statements. Bold move for a man mid-crime. Karen, she ran. And in the process, she lost her phone, her clipboard, and apparently most of her dignity. Doug didn't actually bite until the last guy tried to yank one of the survey flags back up. And even then, it was a warning shot. A firm clamp to the thigh. Enough to leave a mark and a lawsuit, no doubt. The guy screamed like someone cut off his inheritance. Luis called me as they fled, tires throwing gravel like confetti at a redneck wedding. I told him, secure the area, lock it down. Copy every single second of camera footage to 3 different drives, and call Dale. By the time I got back the next day, we had the footage queued up in the office like a damn movie premiere. 3 camera angles, trail cam, drone, and barn roof, all synced and time-stamped. Full audio from the intruder's own GoPro, which Luis had recovered after it got kicked off during the chaos. Not only did it catch the whole fiasco, it also captured Karen clearly saying, "Don't worry, he doesn't even use this land. We'll say it was a mapping mistake. Just act natural." Boom. Conspiracy, trespassing, property damage, animal endangerment, unauthorized surveying, and possibly impersonation of a state contractor, judging by the badges they flashed on the way in. Dale nearly wept with joy when he saw the footage. "Rick," he said, "this is the legal equivalent of watching someone walk into traffic holding a sign that says, 'Sue me.'" The guy who got bit. He was carted off to the ER with a flesh wound and a bruised ego. They tried calling animal control the next day. Claimed my dog was unrestrained and vicious. Animal control came, watched the footage, gave Doug a treat, and said, "Good boy." That night, I sat on the porch with a cold beer and watched the sun go down behind that contested hill. The place was quiet again, but something told me this wasn't over. Karen had made her move, and she got bit, legally and literally. Now it was just a matter of time before she tried to spin it. The envelope came by courier. Not regular mail, courier. Leather shoes, clipboard, fake smile. He handed it to Luis like it was a wedding invitation and said, "Important documents for Mr. Barkley. Kindly ensure he reads them today." Luis stared him down like a stray coyote until he backed off without a thank you. The envelope had a gold-embossed seal from Vista Verde Ranch Estates Legal Division. You know you're in for bullshit when the logo's fancier than the paper it's printed on. I opened it in the office, coffee in one hand, Doug asleep by the door like nothing ever happened. The first page read, "Notice of Civil Action, Vista Verde Ranch Estates, HOA versus Richard J. Barkley. The charges? Let me list this circus. Maintaining dangerous animals on undeveloped property adjacent to residential zones. Premeditated endangerment of community stakeholders. Property damage to HOA equipment, tablet, camera, survey flags. Yeah, seriously. Mental anguish and trauma inflicted upon licensed community professionals. Oh, and my personal favorite, a request for injunctive relief, including temporary seizure of the Southern Tract pending review by county development authorities on the grounds that it presented a public hazard due to neglect and aggressive wildlife. They wanted to take the land, my land, because their own people walked into it like they were invincible and got their overpriced khakis bitten. Dale nearly broke a pen laughing when I handed him the papers. "They're trying to reverse invade your property, Rick," he said. "It's like if someone broke into your house, slipped in your shower, and then sued you for not having a rubber mat." But we didn't just laugh. We went to work. First, we gathered every shred of footage, synced, time-stamped, clean audio. All 3 angles showing them break the lock, trespass, walk past private property signs, and then scatter like rats the moment Doug did his job. Second, we dug into the GoPro. Turns out the footage included radio chatter between Karen and one of her team members using wireless mics. Apparently, their legal expert thought they'd found a loophole, something about abandoned easement zones. Karen responded with, "If he wants to make it ugly, we'll go public. Either way, we're getting that land." We had them on tape admitting intent, deceit, and what sure as hell sounded like premeditated trespassing. But it got even better. Dale traced the environmental board that sent me the letter last month. The one that claimed my land was under review. It wasn't real. It was a non-profit shell registered under a holding company owned by a subsidiary of, wait for it, the Vista Verde Development Alliance, which just so happened to list Karen's HOA as a community partner. This wasn't a zoning issue. This was corporate warfare in yoga pants. So we filed a counterclaim, officially Barkley versus Vista Verde HOA, Karen Merrill, and John Does One. 5 charges: trespassing, attempted fraud, malicious prosecution, slander, false reporting, conspiracy to defraud a landowner, and reckless endangerment. The footage alone could have buried them. But we went further. We pulled up the original land grant documents from the Texas General Land Office. My family's claim traced straight back to the 1870s, uninterrupted, unencumbered, and never annexed into any community development district. We even had a copy of a deed restriction from 1975 explicitly barring the land from being rezoned without consent of the title holder. That title holder was me. We filed in district court, not county. Bigger venue, bigger stakes. And then I did something Karen didn't expect. I leaked it. Local media loves a cowboy versus HOA story. Within 2 days, the McKinney Gazette ran a front-page article. Farmer fights HOA over lakefront land grab with video. I gave them everything: footage, maps, timeline. Karen's voice on audio saying, "I don't even use the land." The public ate it up like a 4th of July chili dog. Karen's team tried to do damage control. Their first press release claimed community engagement efforts misinterpreted as trespassing. The second one, after the video went viral, claimed that Vista Verde HOA values dialogue and regrets any misunderstanding. Sure, misunderstanding. Like stepping on a landmine and claiming you were gardening. Within a week, the story was picked up by 3 regional outlets. HOA watchdog forums went ballistic. A subreddit I didn't know existed are Ho Nightmares, crowned Karen their queen of entitlement. Memes followed. My favorite one had her head photoshopped onto Napoleon crossing the Alps with the caption, "Conqueror of unused land." But memes didn't stop lawsuits, and the lawsuits didn't stop Karen. Because just as I thought they were starting to retreat, licking their wounds and spinning their story, I got word she'd been seen at the county assessor's office, pulling new records, talking to someone behind closed doors. She wasn't backing down. She was preparing for round 2, and next time she'd bring more than a camera crew. It was a Tuesday morning, not yet 8, when I saw the dust trail. From the front porch, cup of black coffee in hand and Doug snoring at my feet, I watched a black Lincoln Navigator chew up my gravel road like it owned the place. Texas plates, HOA issued vanity frame. No mistaking it, Karen. I'd expected something eventually. Another letter, a city inspector, maybe a drone with a new camera, but not her in person after all the legal fire we dropped on her HOA. And definitely not looking like she was dressed for a funeral/photo shoot. The car stopped just outside the house yard gate. Karen stepped out in heels completely unsuited for dirt, and confidence completely unsuited for reality. Behind her, 2 men followed, one wiry, clipboard and phone in hand, the other built like a bouncer trying to pass as a personal assistant, matching black polos, HOA insignia embroidered like they were a federal agency. I didn't move. I let them approach. Karen smiled like the past 6 weeks hadn't happened. "Rick," she said, stretching my name like salt on a wound. "I'm glad you're here. I'd hoped we could talk, off the record." I said nothing. I was already watching the collar of her blouse, a slight bulge just below the second button, too symmetrical for jewelry. And there, the faintest glint of plastic when the sun hit it right. Wire. Sloppy. I sipped my coffee and gave her a look. "That from the city." I nodded at the car. "Or is this a personal invasion?" She flinched for half a second. "We're here peacefully," she said quickly. "No press, no lawyers, just neighbors." I stepped off the porch slowly, boots crunching the gravel with all the intention in the world. Funny, considering last time you sent lawyers before the trespassing. Must be growing up. Her smile hardened. "Look, Rick, let's stop pretending this is about tradition or family legacy. It's just land. You've had your moment in the spotlight. You embarrassed us, fine. But the investors are still committed, and we're still building. With or without you." I stared at her for a long beat, then tilted my head. "You wired, Karen?" Dead silence. The clipboard guy froze. The bigger one subtly moved his arm like he was ready to block a camera shot. She didn't answer. I took a step closer and pointed at her chest, calm as a preacher at a graveside. "Is that a mic under your blouse, or are you just excited to see me?" The smirk cracked. "This is harassment," she snapped, instantly losing the neighborly mask. "We came in good faith." "You broke a lock, Karen," I interrupted. "You cut it with bolt cutters and trespassed onto land you don't own. And now you're trying to entrap me? What's next? Hiding in my barn with a night vision lens and a fake mustache." She lost it. Karen exploded forward, slapped the folder in her hand against my chest hard enough to knock some coffee over my boots, and then, without warning, punched me. Closed fist, right in the sternum. I didn't move. Years in the corpse will do that. Hell, I've been hit harder by opening barn doors. Her assistant, the bouncer, went white and immediately stepped back, hands up. The clipboard guy just froze. Not sure if he was afraid or trying to remember how to breathe. Karen, meanwhile, was shouting something about how I ruined her life, how she gave years to this community, how I was a greedy old man clutching dirt like it was gold. Somewhere in the middle of that tirade, Doug finally stirred, stretched, and growled, low and slow, like he was personally offended by her vocal pitch. I raised a finger, not to Karen, but to the side of the barn. 3 cameras, I said calmly. One by the feed bin, one under the overhang, and one in the oak tree. Full audio. You just committed assault, and I'm guessing this wasn't part of your investor's PR strategy. Karen looked around like she just realized she was on stage at a strip show she didn't audition for. That's when the sirens kicked in. See, about 3 minutes before they arrived, I'd hit the emergency trigger on my phone. It's not high tech. Just a little panic button app wired to alert my lawyer and the sheriff's office that I had an unauthorized confrontation in progress. It also uploads the last 5 minutes of camera footage to a cloud server. Karen must have realized it at the same time I heard tires on the dirt. Her whole face changed. The righteous fury morphed into something between panic and entitlement. She opened her mouth like she was about to spin the situation into a misunderstanding. But it was too late. 2 sheriff's vehicles rolled up. Deputy Sanchez stepped out, hand on his holster but relaxed, like a man who knew exactly what kind of call this was. "Mr. Barkley," he said with a slight nod, "we got your signal." "Everything all right here?" I pointed at Karen, who was suddenly very interested in fixing her hair. "She hit me," I said, "and she brought a mic to try and bait me. All recorded." Sanchez turned to Karen. Ma'am, do you have any weapons on you?" "Of course not," she snapped. "This is ridiculous. He's exaggerating. We came to talk." "We'll sort that out at the station," he replied. "Turn around, please." "What? No. This is a misunderstanding." Her voice cracked. "I'm on the HOA council. You can't arrest me on his word." "Not just his word," I said, holding up my phone. "Video, audio, witnesses. Take your pick." The deputies cuffed her right there on my gravel path, next to a patch of wildflowers and a rusted wheelbarrow I'd been meaning to fix since spring. As they read her rights, the clipboard guy tried to slink away. Sanchez's partner caught him by the elbow and said, "Stick around. We've got questions." Karen didn't go quietly. She shouted something about lawsuits and defamation and how I wouldn't get away with this. I just stood there and sipped my coffee. She didn't know it yet, but she was already finished. The story went national within 48 hours. The footage hit the news before Karen even made bail. My security system had uploaded everything, the wire, the assault, the arrest, to a shared folder Dale and I kept labeled Karen's Greatest Hits. I gave one reporter access, just one. A woman from Dallas who'd been covering HOA abuse cases for years. By the time the morning segment aired, her video had over 1 million views and 3 ad sponsors. They ran it uncut. No commentary, no voiceover, just the sound of Karen snarling, "You don't deserve this land," right before slugging me in the chest, followed by her being cuffed next to a barn cat licking itself in the background. Perfect. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Former HOA members, small-time farmers, ex-employees from Vista Verde's development firm, they all started reaching out. Some were scared, some were pissed. One guy left a voicemail saying, "I knew she was crooked, but I didn't know she was dumb." We'd crossed the Rubicon now. This wasn't about zoning anymore. It was about public perception, reputation, and political fallout. And Karen, she was radioactive. But the real bombshell dropped 3 days after the arrest. Dale called, voice crisp and clipped. "They're auditing Vista Verde." "The HOA?" I asked, already grinning. "No, the developer." County Finance Board launched an investigation. Whistleblower gave them internal documents, falsified infrastructure projections, misused bond funds, and, get this, Karen was listed as a paid consultant, not just president of the HOA. She was getting kickbacks for expansion advocacy. I leaned back in my chair, letting that sink in. She hadn't just been a Karen with a clipboard. She'd been on the take. The news spread like mesquite fire in a dry wind. By week's end, the HOA board was in shambles. Half of them resigned for health reasons. The other half called emergency meetings and tried to distance themselves, saying they'd been misled, that they had no knowledge of Ms. Merrill's secondary employment. The sheriff's office confirmed she was under investigation for fraud, perjury, assault, conspiracy, and unlawful lobbying activity. Her lawyer, a guy who looked like he charged by the exhale, issued a statement blaming stress and provocation. Right. Meanwhile, I finally got a summons. Not to court, but to a public hearing. The County Development Board wanted to reevaluate the eminent domain interest in the Southern Tract. It was a formality. With the scandal exploding and the video everywhere, they weren't going to touch that land with a 10-foot policy pole. But I still went. In person. Hat, boots, fresh shave. Luis rode shotgun just in case. When they called my name, I walked up slow and steady. "Mr. Barkley," the chairman said, adjusting his glasses. "Do you have a statement regarding your position on the proposed integration of your southern acres into regional development planning?" I leaned into the mic. Hell no. There were chuckles, but I didn't smile. This isn't about planning. It's about greed. This land has been in my family since before any of you could spell HOA. You want a nature trail? Go buy a treadmill. You want access to the lake? Build a dock on your own damn property. Silence. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then the room gave a low, rolling applause. The kind that says, "Finally, someone said it." The chairman cleared his throat. "Your objection is noted." After the hearing, I walked out into the parking lot and found a local TV crew waiting. They tried to shove a mic in my face. "Mr. Barkley, would you say this has been a personal victory?" "No," I said. "It's been personal warfare." That soundbite made it to late-night news. People sent me T-shirts with the quote printed across the chest. But the best part? That night, I found a box on my porch. No return address, just a folded paper inside. "Thanks for standing your ground. If you ever want to run for something, I'll donate." Underneath it, a hand-carved wooden sign clearly custom-made. "Not for sale. Not for you." I nailed it to the old oak at the southern gate. Felt damn good. But I wasn't done yet. Because Karen might have been in handcuffs and the HOA might have been falling apart, but there were still loose ends. And some of them were tied to my land. The lawsuits didn't die with Karen's arrest. They just mutated. While she sat in county lockup awaiting formal arraignment, her legal team tried every angle short of witchcraft to stop the bleeding. Motions to dismiss, injunctions to delay, even a bizarre claim that the HOA had acted independently of Mrs. Merrill's personal capacity, as if she hadn't literally punched me on camera while wearing their damn logo. But here's the thing about corruption. It rarely exists in a vacuum. And once you pull one rotten post from the fence, the rest start leaning. Dale and I kept digging. It became sport. We subpoenaed internal HOA emails, development meeting minutes, correspondence with county officials, anything connected to the attempted land grab. What we found was damning. There were secret annexation maps dated over a year ago, showing my southern acres already colored in as part of Phase 4 expansion. Karen had promised it to the developers before she ever knocked on my door. They'd drawn up landscaping plans, neighborhood names, even projected tax revenue, off property they didn't own. The arrogance was biblical. One email from a project manager read, "Barkley won't hold out forever. We just need legal leverage or a PR push to flip public opinion." They were trying to wear me down with bureaucracy and bad faith. Well, that didn't work out so well, did it? And then, just when I thought the chaos might start settling, the HOA made one final desperate move. They called an emergency community vote to push for the county to invoke eminent domain. Their logic? That my land was critical for regional infrastructure and ecological access. Ecological access. From the same people who wanted to plow it over with cul-de-sacs and dog parks. They spread pamphlets, blasted social media, held open-air meetings where they painted me as a hostile obstructionist landowner threatening the prosperity of Collin County. One flyer, I swear to God, called me a selfish relic of the old Texas. Had a photoshopped picture of me in black and white with glowing red eyes like I was a Bond villain. But their mistake was going public. Again. Because they didn't expect my neighbors, the ones who'd stayed quiet until now, to rise up. First came Hank Brewer, a quiet old cattleman who sold 50 acres 2 years back and regretted it every damn day. He stood up at the county meeting and said, "Rick's the only one left with the balls we all lost when we signed the dotted line. You let them take his land, they'll take the lake next." Then came Mary Ellen, the beekeeper's widow from down the road, whose husband taught me how to weld. She brought a photo album, black and white snapshots of my granddad riding that southern hill on horseback, rifle slung across his back. She held it up and said, "This ain't just dirt, it's memory, and no HOA owns that." The gallery applauded. The county board table squirmed like boys caught sneaking whiskey. The vote crushed, 81% against. Even the local paper printed a rare opinion piece. "In defense of stubbornness, why the land still matters." Karen's motion, posthumous in political terms, died on the vine. And that was it. The board withdrew interest. The developers went quiet. The HOA, in shambles, voted in a new president, a guy who, by some miracle, called me the next week and said, "Mr. Barkley, we'd like to formally apologize for the actions of our prior administration." I told him thanks, but no thanks. Then I made a call of my own. Not to a lawyer, not to a reporter, but to a conservation consultant out of Fort Worth. We met by the lake 2 days later. I showed her the ridge, the wildlife corridors, the bur oak clusters, and the stream bed that floods after spring storms. She nodded the whole time, eyes scanning the horizon. "This could qualify," she said, "easily. You'd need to establish a conservation easement with generational protections, but the land has integrity." "Good," I told her. Because I'm tired of playing defense. The paperwork took 2 months. Legal, bureaucratic legal. The kind of slog that makes you want to pour a glass of whiskey every time someone says Appendix C. But I didn't complain. Not once. Because every signature, every notarized stamp, every certified letter was a bullet fired back at the kind of arrogance that thought it could buy heritage with bylaws and landscaping plans. On a cloudless Friday morning, standing in the Collin County Clerk's office, I signed the last form. With that stroke of the pen, my southern 1,000 acres, the land Karen wanted so badly she lost her mind over it, became a protected conservation easement. In legal terms, untouchable, no development, no resale outside the bloodline, no construction that isn't directly tied to agricultural or ecological preservation. For them, a dead end. For me, a final word. We had a little ceremony the next week. Nothing big, just a few friends, my crew, the new conservation liaison from Fort Worth, and a barbecue pit working overtime. Luis brought his family. Mary Ellen brought lemon pie. The same old oak tree at the edge of the disputed land bore witness as we installed the sign. 12-inch steel, weatherproof, bolted deep. It read, "This land is protected, not for sale, not for you." People took photos. One of the local reporters asked if I had anything to say now that the battle was over. I looked at the sign, then out at the hill, where the sunlight cut across the grass just like it did when I was a boy, sitting on the fender of my dad's truck, listening to the wind and pretending I'd own the sky one day. Then I said, "They tried to bury me under paperwork and pressure, but I've got deeper roots than they expected." The article ran with that quote, "Karen, she took a plea. 8 years, 2 suspended, 6 inside. Official charges, criminal trespass, assault, fraud, perjury, and abuse of public office." The judge, a fifth-generation Texan himself, looked her dead in the eye and said, "This isn't California. We don't steal land with handshakes and slogans." Vista Verde HOA collapsed. What remained of their board restructured into something toothless. No more expansions, no more lawsuits, just yard fines and newsletter drama. The developer pulled funding from the region entirely. The Vista Verde Phase 4 project, the one they sketched over my land before even meeting me, was marked terminated due to zoning complications. And the best part? I didn't just win. I outlived them. The conservation team installed wildlife cams to monitor the area. Turns out that ridge Karen salivated over is part of a rare migratory path for hawks and monarchs. The stream supports a small but resilient turtle population. We might even get state-level ecological designation in a few years if the biology checks out. That's fine. I'm in no rush. The land isn't going anywhere. Luis still runs day-to-day operations. I spend more time on the porch now, boots off, dog nearby. Doug's getting older, but he still perks up if a car drives too slow past the gate. Good boy never forgot his mission. I started writing a little. Just notes, stories, memories from back when the soil stained your hands red and a handshake still meant something. Maybe one day my grandson will want to publish it. Or maybe he'll just read it and laugh at how Grandpa made a whole county back down with a fence, a dog, and a middle finger to HOA bureaucracy. But the land will be waiting for him, same as it waited for me.